An ordinary bus ride turns into an unforgettable life lesson when a group of reckless young people decide to confront the wrong man. A reserved veteran with a past they couldn't even dream of understanding. The bus came to a gentle hissing stop at the intersection of Maple Street and Franklin Avenue, and its doors swung open with a metallic groan. A stream of passengers exhausted after another endless day began to rise, their faces reflecting the weight of their daily routines. Among them an old man with dark skin. He advanced with firm but slow steps, support loaded with a silent dignity that spoke of years of experience. In his hand, he carried a wooden cane, its surface worn by the friction of the years, and a small bag full of essential provisions. The man moved to the back of the bus. His walk was slow and determined. As he sat down, he carefully placed the cane against his knee and looked out the window. The warm light of the sunset fell on his face, highlighting the deep lines that told stories of adversity and hard-earned wisdom. He settled in silently, his presence barely noticed by most of the passengers. Only a couple of curious glances from children or a polite smile from a stranger momentarily caught his figure. The bus started, its engine again resonating softly as it moved through the chaos of the city. Inside, a symphony of murmurs, footsteps, and the occasional sound of a mobile phone filled the air. But the old man remained oblivious, his serenity unwavering as he observed the outside world with eyes that seemed to contain decades of stories. However, not everyone perceived the depth of his presence, not everyone understood the weight of his experience, and soon that incomprehension would give way to an event that no one would forget. When the bus stopped at the next stop, the atmosphere was about to transform, and no one, not even the old man, could anticipate what was about to happen. The vehicle screeched to a stop in front of the entrance to the high school, and the change in energy was immediate. A group of teenagers, 4 in total, got on with quick steps and a carefree attitude. Their laughter was loud, almost shrill, loaded with a confidence that bordered on insolence. Each one of them was carrying backpacks on his shoulder, and his presence interrupted the constant murmur of the bus like a flash of lightning in the middle of the calm. They stayed near the front. Their eyes scanned the seats with a mixture of curiosity and challenge, as if they were looking for someone who would offer them an opportunity for entertainment. One of them, a tall young man with a black cap turned backwards, gave his companion a slight push while discreetly pointing towards the back. "Look at that one over there," he murmured with a crooked smile, although his tone was loud enough to catch the attention of some nearby passengers. Mocking smiles spread among them as they walked slowly down the aisle. Their laughter filled the air with an unmistakable intention. The other passengers began to move uncomfortably in their seats. Some looked away at the old man while others preferred to pretend they hadn't noticed anything. The young men stopped right in front of him. Their postures reflected a mixture of impudence and challenge. "How are you, old man?" said the boy with the cap, leaning over the seat in front of the old man. "Did you escape from the museum? Or what?" The old man remained silent, his gaze was still fixed on the window, his hands firmly resting on the cane as if it were an anchor in the middle of a storm. His stillness, far from dissuading them, seemed to feed the young people's audacity. One of them, a shorter boy with a gray hooded sweatshirt, decided to intervene. "That cane is for walking or for not falling to pieces," he laughed out loud. That was soon seconded by his friends. The other passengers exchanged uncomfortable glances, but no one said anything. A woman in the front hugged her bag closer while a man in a suit nervously adjusted his tie, concentrating on the screen of his phone as if it were his salvation. The whole bus seemed to have reached a tacit consensus. Silence was the safest way, but the young people did not seem satisfied. They took a step closer, raising the volume of their mockery and making their comments even more hurtful. "Sure, he has some money there," snapped one of them, a boy with close-cropped hair. "What do you have in that bag?" "Grandpa, leftovers from yesterday." When the laughter reached its peak, the old man made his first move. He raised his head slightly, and although his face remained calm, inexpressive, something in his presence changed almost imperceptibly. For an instant, the air in the bus seemed to freeze and the boys hesitated. The hesitation, however, lasted only a moment. In a second, encouraged by the old man's silence, the boy in the cap leaned his body even closer, a mocking smile spreading across his face. "Come on, old man, you've lost your voice," he said, tapping his cane lightly with the tip of his shoe. The teenagers' laughter echoed throughout the bus, bouncing around like an irritating echo that filled every corner. Meanwhile, the old man kept a firm grip on the cane. His gaze was fixed and imperturbable. He finally raised his eyes to the young man who had spoken. There was no trace of anger in them, nor fear, only a penetrating calm that seemed to cut through the air. The passengers continued to glance at each other, avoiding getting involved but unable to ignore the growing tension. A young woman squeezed her bag so hard that her knuckles turned white, while a middle-aged man in the corner coughed nervously but remained silent. No one seemed to have the will to intervene, as if they were trapped by a combination of fear and curiosity. The boy in the gray sweatshirt showed no signs of stopping. He leaned a little closer to the old man with a smile full of curiosity. Challenge, what's wrong, don't you understand the language, or what he said in a mocking tone, starting another wave of laughter among his friends. The old man continued without saying a word, but this time he adjusted his posture, slightly straightening up with a deliberate calm while his cane tired firmly against the ground. The movement was barely perceptible, but it seemed full of intention, as if it were the prelude to something significant between the teenagers. One of them, the smallest, threw an uneasy glance at the group. "Hey, maybe we should leave it already," he muttered in an uncertain voice, but his words were completely ignored. "You have a problem, old man?" insisted the boy with the cap, with a feigned irritation in his voice. "We are just looking for a little fun, relax." It was then that the old man broke the silence for the first time. His low but firm voice cut through the bustle of the bus with a clarity that surprised everyone. "They always find fun in bothering others." The vehicle fell into a strange silence. Even the boys who had shown themselves so bold were taken aback by the question. It was not an answer full of anger or sarcasm, but one that conveyed an unexpected calm, one that she asked to be heard. "And what do you care?" replied the boy in the sweatshirt, trying to regain control of the situation. The man slightly tilted his head, his gaze unwavering, never stopping to observe them. "Because I have met young people like you before," he answered with a calm and measured tone. "Another time, another place." They did not laugh so much when they faced true fear. The atmosphere became dense, replacing laughter with a palpable discomfort. The teenagers exchanged glances of uncertainty. Their arrogance began to crumble. However, just when it seemed that the situation could take a turn, the boy in the cap let out a mocking laugh, rejecting the idea of backing down. "What are you going to do, scare us with that cane?" the boy exclaimed, raising his voice, trying to regain his posture. The challenge hung in the air, challenging the old man to react. The bus made a noise when taking a sharp turn, and the boy in the sweatshirt grabbed a nearby handrail in order not to lose his balance. The old man remained motionless, his cane still firm on the ground, as he slowly raised his head to look directly at the boys. "Do you think this cane is what he kept standing?" he asked with a calm that did not hide the depth of his message. "No, young people, this cane is only that. What really holds me up, it is something much more solid." The boy with the cap let out a nervous laugh, his tone no longer the confidence that it had shown before. "Oh yes, and what is that?" he asked, challenge Olo. Although his voice wavered, the old man inhaled deeply, his gaze slowly swept over each of the teenagers. "When he was your age," he began, each word loaded with a memory that he did not need to scream. "He carried something much heavier than a cane. He carried a rifle, crossing distant jungles on the other side of the world. He was 19 years old, barely a little older than you. Vietnam." The words of the old man floated in the air, causing a palpable silence that enveloped the bus, drowning out even the most distant conversations between the passengers. The old man continued speaking, his deep voice loaded with experiences. "In those days we had no room for jokes like yours. We had to grow up suddenly, faster than one should. Some of us never came back, and those of us who did," he paused, his hand lightly squeezing the cane, "we came back with more than the weight of our team. We carry scars, some visible but most hidden." The youngest of the group shifted uncomfortably, his gaze fixed on the ground. Even the boy in the sweatshirt lost his defiant attitude, his smile slowly fading. "Let me with you tell them something about fear," the old man said, leaning slightly towards Adante. "It's not about the taunts on a bus or facing someone with a cane. It's about hearing the crack of a branch behind you and not knowing if it's an enemy or a death trap. It's seeing a friend fall beside you, knowing you can't stop to help." There was a slight hesitation in his voice, but he regained it firmly. "And you know what else he carried with me," he added, fixing his gaze on the boy with the cap. "Discipline, respect, and the understanding that true strength lies not in knocking others down but in knowing when to stand firm and when to keep silent." The motionless passengers absorbed his words, some passing a hand over their eyes, others looking out the window pretending they weren't listening. The atmosphere grew even thicker, the air charged with palpable tension. The boy in the sweatshirt muttered, his low, regretful voice, "We didn't mean anything by that, sir." His tone was almost inaudible, but the remorse was evident in his hunched posture. The old man nodded slightly, his attitude softening it without the need for words. "I know," he said calmly, "but words carry weight, boys, and you never know what someone might be carrying." Before the teens could react, the bus began to slow down towards another stop. The old man leaned back in his seat, letting his cane rest gently on his knee. The silence that followed was not empty but filled with deep reflection, a kind of stillness that lasts a long time after the moment had passed. The doors of the bus, they opened with a sigh, but no one stood up to get off. The teens remained in the aisle, uncomfortable, their fading bravado replaced by visible discomfort. The passengers, who had previously been simple silent witnesses, began to look at the old man with expressions that varied between admiration and guilt. The boy with the cap, who had led the jeers, looked down at his sneakers, shifting uncomfortably. His confident air seemed like a distant memory. "Look, we were just joking," he said, his tone lower than ever, almost embarrassed. His gaze avoided the old man's, conscious of the weight those words carried. The old man, without looking away, the gaze had his posture erect, but his expression softened, reflecting a silent understanding. However, his voice remained firm as a rock in the middle of a storm. "Joking can get you in trouble," he said in a low voice, barely a whisper that seemed to resonate in the dense air. "Sometimes problems you can't get out of. I've seen it too many times." The boy with the sweatshirt, visibly affected, tried to find some way to reconnect with the old man, but the fear in his voice was evident. Did you lose people out there? He asked, his words hesitant. The old man nodded slowly, his gaze lost in a distant point, as if the memories took him to a very different place from the bus. More than he wanted to count. Good men, brave men, and not only in war. He paused as if he thought about what he was about to say. Some came back but could not leave the fight behind. You would be surprised how fragile it can be. Strength when tested in the wrong way. The words remained in the air, heavy and full of meaning. Even the quietest of the group, who had hardly spoken, found the courage to say something. We didn't want to be disrespectful, he muttered, barely audible. The old man made a slight gesture with his head, his features sweating a little. Elito, it is not measured only by what you say, he said in a calm tone. It is reflected in your actions. Never forget it. The bus fell into a palpable silence, as if time had stopped. MIAs. Everyone observed the scene. It was then that a woman who had been silent until that moment broke the silence with a firm but warm voice. Boys should feel grateful, she said calmly. You have just learned a lesson that few have the opportunity to hear. The woman's words seemed to break the spell that had fallen on the bus. The teenagers looked around, catching the approving glances of the other passengers. Silently they approached the old man, murmuring apologies as they passed near him. When the bus stopped at the next stop, the group got off, leaving behind their arrogance and laughter. With the doors closed, the old man leaned back in his seat, his eyes fixed on the landscape outside the window. The atmosphere in the bus was no longer tense or uncomfortable, but full of reflection, almost reverent. The passengers began talking amongst themselves, sharing stories about relatives who had served in the war, or simply expressing their admiration for the man who had handled the situation so calmly. But as the conversations filled the air, the old man remained silent, unchanging like a rock, calm and firm, supported by the strength that had allowed him to overcome much more than this simple journey. As the bus approached its destination, the atmosphere had completely changed. Where before there had been discomfort and distance, now there was an air of collective reflection. The passengers no longer saw the old man as a simple man, but as a silent source of wisdom and resistance. Finally, it was a young woman sitting in front of him who broke the silence. Thank you for what you did, for everything you have lived through, the young woman said in a soft voice, her tone full of deep gratitude, reflecting the emotions of those who did not dare to speak. The old man nodded slightly. His face showed a kind but contained expression. I did what I had to do, he replied calmly. That is all anyone can do. The important thing is what they do now with the life they have, with the opportunities that are given to them. His words spread throughout the bus like a silent blanket that enveloped everyone, trapping them in its profound message. The young woman smiled, although timidly, and then looked out the window again, immersed in her thoughts, when the bus began to slow down. As it approached the bus corner of Ashland Avenue, the old man stood up from his seat, leaning firmly on his cane. Some passengers, as if they instinctively knew what was happening, moved aside to make room for him. He paused before leaving, his gaze scanning the faces of those present as if he wanted to leave them with something else. Be kind to one another, he said in a voice that carried a calm authority. You never know the battle someone is fighting. With that, the old man stepped down to the platform, the doors of the bus closing softly behind him. The passengers remained silent, as if they were still processing the words they had just heard. Then the engine roared again and the bus resumed its journey, but something had changed in the air, something intangible but present. For the rest of the trip, the passengers not only carried their belongings but also a profound lesson about the strength that lies in humility and the importance of respecting others. Maybe, just maybe, the teenagers walking home from the bus stop would also carry that lesson with them, allowing it to influence the way they face the world from now on. This story is a reminder of the power of dignity and what respect really means in a world where its true value is often forgotten. If this message touched something in you, share it. Let's make the effort together to build a world where kindness and understanding are the norm, not the exception. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that inspire, challenge, and remind us of what really matters.